Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Tech in 10, the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs football show from the Ruston Daily Leader. I am sports editor Matt Belinson coming to you ahead of the 2025 football season for the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. We are less than 10 days away from the opener when I'm recording this. The Bulldogs open the season August 30th against Southeastern Louisiana at Joe Stadium. Entering year four of the Sonny Cumbie era and a pivotal year for this coaching staff, which we'll get into later. But obviously, with less than 10 days before the opener, obviously everyone wants to know, what does Matt Belinson think about the season? That's on the minds of, I know, so many Louisiana Tech fans out there. So wanted to obviously oblige and give you my annual season predictions video. I've done this the past couple years when I've done Tech in 10, and wanted to run it back this year and give you my thoughts on the Bulldogs 2025 season and what I think is going to happen. I think let's set the table before I go through the schedule game by game. For those that maybe didn't pay attention throughout this offseason, throughout fall camp, it's once again a season of change for Louisiana Tech. Not at the head coaching position, but a brand new offensive coordinator in Tony Franklin, a brand new defensive coordinator in Luke Olson. It's pretty much a brand new receiving core. It looks like it's going to be a new starting quarterback, which we'll get into here in a minute. Pretty much a brand new defensive line. And basically beyond that, there's a couple guys that are returning starters at some key spots. But other than that, this is basically a brand new team that took the field, against Army, in the bowl game last December. So I think if you're a Louisiana Tech fan and kind of just rolled into this season, half paying attention, I think you're in for a treat on August 30th with all the new names that you're going to have to learn and understand. So that's the first thing. Is I think this is just another season defined by change. It's another season that's going to be defined by, can new guys in the coaching staff, can new guys in important roles on the football field, can they step up and make plays? It's clearly the position that Louisiana Tech finds itself in. I think some by its own making, and some, frankly, just by things that unfortunately did not go their way, as far as keeping Jeremiah Johnson as their defensive coordinator. Obviously, the botched play calling that we've seen offensively over the past couple of years. So a lot of things have factored into that, has obviously led to another season that kind of starts off with some change here. So I wanted to just kind of set the table that way. But let's dive into the schedule. I think that's obviously the coolest thing that we get to start off this video with is, what's kind of the outlook, as a Tech fan, what should you expect this year for the Bulldogs? I think first and foremost, when you look at the schedule on paper, it sets up really well through the first 6 games of the season to build some real momentum, and I think set this team up later in the season for some bowl game success. I'm just going to dive straight into the schedule here. You open the season August 30th against Southeastern at home. They're a pretty okay FCS program, but like every FCS matchup, it's a matchup that you should win. You should win handily. So I would expect Louisiana Tech to start the season strong with a win against Southeastern. The following week, you're going down to Baton Rouge and you're playing LSU. Obviously LSU opens the season at Clemson, so the Tigers currently have their mind focused on the Tigers. The other Tigers, I should say. So I'm definitely curious to see kind of maybe what LSU's focus is coming in for their home opener against Louisiana Tech. But I do expect LSU to run away with that game. So I have Louisiana Tech at 1-1, kind of through the first 2 chalk games, if you will, of the season. And this is where it gets interesting. And this is where I think if you look at the next 4 games, it really sets up Louisiana Tech well to be in position, to contend for not only the Conference USA title, but be in postseason contention, in the latter half of the season. You come back home after that LSU game, you play a New Mexico State program that, granted, they did finish 3-9 last year. They did beat you in Las Cruces, so you have to take that in consideration. That being said, I do have Louisiana Tech winning that game. I think New Mexico State is still a program that doesn't really have an identity. I don't really think they have a ton of, really proven scary playmakers that you need to be worried about. So I would expect the Bulldogs to come back, home to Joe Stadium and start conference play with a strong win against New Mexico State. And then you come back home the following week against a future Sun Belt rival again in Southern Miss. Again, a program that is going through a coaching transition. They're coming off a 1-win season, I should say. So you're talking about 2 back-to-back, programs that frankly have not had a lot of winning success recently. And I think the coaching turnover, I think frankly Southern Miss is going to take some time, probably if I had to guess, to kind of just get their feet under them and just kind of figure out how this coaching staff wants to operate. So I have Louisiana Tech picking up 2 straight wins, New Mexico State and Southern Miss. So I currently have the Bulldogs at 3-1 at this point. That's a great start. It would be the complete opposite of where the Bulldogs were last year going into their bye week. Last year, obviously, you opened the season with kind of a scary win over Nicholls State, and then you obviously dropped 3 straight to start 1-3. So this would be a great sign for Louisiana Tech if they can pull this off. And I think, and in my mind, I think it continues. You obviously then go on the road to UTEP. Scotty Walden, continues to try and build the Miners into his image. But again, UTEP, it continues to struggle as a football program. And even though Louisiana Tech has four straight losing seasons, three straight under Sonny Cumbie, Sonny Cumbie is 3-0 against UTEP in his tenure here. So until proven otherwise, I'm going to say the Bulldogs are going to win that game. So I have Louisiana Tech at 4-1 currently, after they go on the road and beat UTEP. And then the following week, again, the schedule, the first six games, it sets up really nicely for this program to build some momentum. You go on the road to a Kennesaw State program that went 2-10 last year, and then you beat 33-0 in the regular season finale. So I have Louisiana Tech winning that game, and your eyes are not deceiving you. I currently have Louisiana Tech at 5-1 at this point because you look at the first six games on paper; those opponents combined for a 25-48 record last year. And again, you're talking about a Southern Miss program that won one game. Kennesaw State won two games, two of the worst FBS programs in the country. And then you're talking about UTEP and New Mexico State, two 3-win programs projected to be bottom of the barrel Conference USA opponents. So I feel like the first six games, outside of the LSU game, Louisiana Tech should be favored, and Louisiana Tech should, frankly, win these games. And again, it's kind of deja vu compared to last year, where you think about, obviously, you start with Nichols, and obviously you go on the road to NC State, and then you come back against Tulsa will take care of them, FIU, and then you don't win the FIU, and you don't win the Tulsa games, and that's what allows you to kind of go into your bye week 1-3. So certainly, this is not a Louisiana Tech program that has, I think, earned the benefit of the doubt. When you have four straight losing seasons, you don't get to puff your chest and say that we should be favored in all these games. But at the same time, when you're talking about kind of the context around these programs, and I think just given the fact that Louisiana Tech is getting three of their first four games at home, it sets up really well for the Bulldogs. So I have them at 5-1 to their first six games, and so I think that would be a great stretch for Louisiana Tech. If you wanted to say maybe they're 4-2, if they maybe go on the road and lose at UTEP, something like that, or maybe they lose that home game to Southern Miss. I mean, there's certainly some toss-up games. I'm not saying again Louisiana Tech is at the point where they're just going to steamroll these teams, but I just think given the context around these opponents that Louisiana Tech should be favored. That being said, the back half of the schedule, if you're not taking care of business in the early portion, it's going to be difficult to uphill climb. Now, granted, you do get Western Kentucky and Sam Houston and Liberty, in my mind, probably the three best teams in Conference USA, outside of Jacksonville State, obviously, who won the league, but you don't play Jacksonville State this year. You're talking about the three other best teams in this league. You're getting them at home. So, I mean, the schedule sets up really well as far as maybe the location, but certainly the opponents are still going to be tough in the final six games. I do have Louisiana Tech after that Kennesaw State game. I have them coming back home and losing to Western Kentucky. I think Western Kentucky, obviously they brought in some FCS transfers. They kind of reloaded at quarterback once again, but we know what that program does offensively. Obviously, Louisiana Tech's defense, they kicked 4 field goals last year, was able to win in Bowling Green, but I would not expect that to be the case this year. I think Western Kentucky is going to come back and get their revenge. So I have Western winning that game. And then I also have Sam Houston in back-to-back weeks, beating Louisiana Tech at home. Sam Houston coming off a 10-win season. I would not expect them to be in that 10-win region again, but they certainly bring back some talent, and I think they're going to be right in the mix again. So, and obviously this is a Sam Houston program that is 2-0 against you since they've joined Conference USA, so I think that also has to factor in as well. So I have Sam Houston beating Louisiana Tech. So that's back-to-back losses, so that's currently a 5-3 record for Louisiana Tech. But then I have the Bulldogs going on the road the following week to Conference USA newcomer Delaware, and I have them beating the Blue Hens. It's going to be a long trip. It's going to be a cold trip. You're going there in November. Obviously, quite a far cry from Ruston, Louisiana, as far as weather. But I do have the Bulldogs beating Delaware. Delaware's been an okay FCS program. They're coming off 9 wins, I believe. That head coach has been there for a number of years, so they have some continuity, but I think that Delaware is going to need some time to kind of adjust to FBS football and Conference USA, so I have the Bulldogs going on the road and beating Delaware. The following week, I do have them going on the road to Washington State and losing. The schedule makers did not help Louisiana Tech with this one. Back-to-back weeks of you're at Delaware and then you're at Washington State. I don't really know how that works, but that's the schedule that they have, so you just got to play those games. I do have the Louisiana Tech losing to Washington State, and then I also have them coming back the following week and playing Liberty. And at this point, I think Liberty's probably going to be playing for a Conference USA title berth. And I have Louisiana Tech losing that game. I think the last time, obviously, Louisiana Tech faced Liberty, it was a blowout. It did not go well, and Louisiana Tech didn't really belong on the field. So I think Louisiana Tech is stronger than that 2022 team that we saw. At the same time, I'm just not sure I'm not sure if Louisiana Tech is going to be able to match up with Liberty. So I have Liberty, coming to Joe Stadium and beating the Bulldogs. And then I have the Bulldogs beating Missouri State on the road to finish the regular season 7-5. I'll repeat that again. I have Louisiana Tech finishing 7-5 in the regular season this year. I have wins over Southeastern, New Mexico State, Southern Miss, UTEP, Kennesaw State, Delaware, and Missouri State. I think that schedule sets up to make that a reality. I think if you maybe wanted to say, hey, one of those home games against Western Kentucky, Sam, or Liberty, there's a chance maybe Louisiana Tech pulls one out. Maybe you're sitting at 8-4. But again, when you look at the history of Louisiana Tech in recent years, there's been too many matchups. There's been too many points in a season where you're thinking, oh boy, it sets up really well for them to kind of go on a run here. And then, I think back to the Middle Tennessee game last year where, they kind of changed offensive play callers. Evan Bullock has his best game of his career, and you're thinking, oh boy, here they go. The play calling change worked, and this offense is about to take off. And then they go on the road to New Mexico State the following week and lay a complete egg against a terrible defense and just did not compete and did not give themselves really a chance to win from the go. And so obviously it was a heartbreaking loss, and Buck Buchanan misses the kick. But just bottom line is you should have beaten New Mexico State. It's not a game that you should have been dancing around with. So I think bottom line is I have them going 7-5. But again, this is a program that has shown in recent years that just because it looks good on paper, just because you think this is the moment where they're finally about to seize opportunities, they just have not. And again, the facts are the facts. This program is coming off its fourth straight losing season. They have to prove that they're a winning program. They have to prove that they're back to the winning culture that we've seen in previous seasons under Skip Holtz. So I definitely feel like 7-5 is attainable. That's my record prediction. That's what I have them going. I do want to say, just from an objective viewer standpoint, I definitely feel like there is a scenario where this could go really good, again, 7-8 wins, or this could go really poorly. I think when you're talking about offensive and defensive coordinator changes year after year, obviously I know Jeremiah Johnson worked really well as the DC last year and finished, top 15 as a defense, and so that was great, and obviously it worked really well for Louisiana Tech. But I would just throw this out there just as a possibility, just for fans to kind of talk about, if they feel like Louisiana Tech is in contention for 9, 10, 8 wins, something like that. I would just throw this out there as maybe, if you want to call it pessimistic, that's fine. I think I just call it realistic and just looking at facts, and you can kind of look at how scenarios could work out. So let's just take this for example. Everyone's really excited that Tony Franklin is back as the offensive coordinator. Obviously, when he was here in the early 2010s, this offense was humming. Obviously, they led the country in scoring in 2012. It was great. Everyone loved it. They do not have the NFL talent that Tony Franklin had when he was previously here. They do not have the proven, no doubt playmakers. I mean, you've heard it from Sonny Cumbie, you've heard it from receiver coaches throughout fall camp that, yes, they're going to line guys up in the opener and they have guys that they're excited about, but there are not these guys that are just standing out as like, wow, this is a proven, no doubt playmaker that the defenses really have to honor. Certainly, maybe guys can improve to become that point, but this offense and the personnel that it has, it is not what Tony Franklin was working with previously. And I just want to throw out, Tony Franklin, he's got over 20 years of FBS play calling experience. He has not coached FBS football since 2020. That's a long time, in between stints. And the last stint that he had at Middle Tennessee was not great. That offense was 105th in the country in scoring. So he did not exactly leave the FBS ranks in high regard. So I just want to throw that out there that it has been a long time since Tony Franklin has called an FBS football game. It's been a long time since he had to go up against and adjust against an FBS defense. But that being said, they're really high on this Trey Kukuk, who I'd expect to be this team's starting quarterback from Saddleback Community College. This is a quarterback that's a mobile, dual threat quarterback. It's something that Tony Franklin is really high on, and he feels like Trey is going to be able to operate this offense. So who knows? By the time the season's over, maybe the offense just all clicked, and Trey was the quarterback, and it was the right decision. But I just want to throw that out there that this offensive personnel and frankly the play caller, it's not what it was in 2012. So, I just want to throw that out there for Louisiana Tech fans. I would also say at quarterback, again, I mentioned Trey Kukuk. I would expect this team to name him their starter, but at the same time, when you look at the past couple seasons, quarterback instability has been a huge problem for this program. Again, I know some of that has to do with injuries, but some of that has to do with underperformance as well. I mean, you think back to Sonny Cumbie's first season in 2022. They roll out Matthew Downing as this team's starter. Not only did he not play well, then obviously he gets injured. Parker McNeil comes in. It did pretty well. Then he gets hurt, and then Landry Liddy, let's throw him out there for a couple games. And then you go into 2023, hey, Hank Bachmeier's turn, let's go. He gets hurt for a couple games. Jack Turner comes in, and then obviously, again, Hank comes back in for the past couple games, and then obviously you open last season with Jack as your starter. He did okay, then underperformance, and then injury, occurred. Then Blake Baker comes in, he gets hurt, and then finally Evan Bullock. So, I think the idea of Evan Bullock starting 10 games last year and then now presumably he's not going to be your starter the following season, I don't know really what the answer is for that. I certainly, again, when you look at the history of this program in recent years, the quarterback instability has really hurt them. But again, I think the lack of mobility from Evan that he showed last year, I mean, you take 33 sacks and 10 starts, that's not great. And that's obviously not good for your health and not good for the offense that Tony Franklin wants to run. So I certainly can see why they at least wanted to give him competition and maybe at least try, Trey Kukuk out as the starter. But, I'm just a little skeptical, frankly. I think it's just the idea of you're going to let Evan Bullock start 10 games last year and then he goes into the 2025 season presumably as not the starter. He has not run with the first team offense throughout the last couple practices in fall camp, so I would assume that he's not going to be this team starter. So I think that it just begs the question of what was really, I guess, the point of kind of having him play as much as he did. Again, experience helps, but if he's going to start 10 games last year to not start this year, I guess I don't really understand where the continuity and the purpose of those game reps was. So obviously, I'm not a football coach. They feel like Trey, is giving them the best chance to win. So, we'll see how that turns out. And he's shown flashes in fall camp. He is a very mobile quarterback. He's got a pretty decent arm. So, again, maybe by midweek, mid portion of the season, maybe I'm proven wrong, and maybe Trey is no doubt this team's best quarterback. But I would just throw out there that since 2020, Tech's week 1 starting quarterback has not started a full season. So that's just the bottom line. So we'll see if they can break that curse this year. So bottom line is I have Louisiana Tech at 7-5 in 2025, and then obviously that would, of course, lead to a bowl game. Talking to Ryan Ivey, Louisiana Tech's athletic director, a 7-5 season would certainly keep Sonny Cumbie as the head coach at Louisiana Tech. Obviously making a bowl game and potentially winning a bowl game is certainly the priorities for him entering year 4. Again, when you're 11-27 as the head coach at Louisiana Tech in 3 seasons, that doesn't exactly give you much leash, I think, as far as timeline. So this is certainly a program that needs to win. This is a program that has to make a bowl game this year, and again, like I mentioned, 7-5 will certainly get that done. So that's my official record prediction. Real quick, I want to highlight some breakout players that I think fans should be paying attention to this season. These are a couple guys that not only stood out in fall camp to me, but frankly, coaching staff has talked them up, and it's certainly going to make them some key contributors this year. So let's start offensively. Again, I mentioned the playmakers are kind of a question mark going in, but one guy that has stood out, I think, not only in the practice reps that he's gotten, but for what coaches have talked about him, it's wide receiver Dane Benedicts. He's a junior. He's a former walk-on, actually. He walked on this program in the spring from Saddleback Community College, the same community college that Trey Kukuk, quarterbacked at last year. And again, Dane, a former walk-on, but he certainly earned, first-team reps throughout fall camp. He's going to start at wide receiver against Southeastern. You're going to see him out there. He wears number 80. He's kind of a shifty guy. He caught 9 touchdowns last year for Saddleback, so he certainly knows how to get into the end zone. This is a guy that I think they're giving a lot of opportunities to. It remains to be seen if he can do it, consistently against FBS competition. But, it's certainly a nice story, a former walk-on getting an opportunity to be a team starter at the Conference USA level. So he's definitely a guy that I think they're going to give opportunities to. And I think until maybe we see a true playmaker emerge, Dane is going to be one of those guys that's going to be given opportunities. So I would keep an eye on number 80, Dane Benedicts, as a wide receiver threat this year on offense to keep an eye on for this offense under Tony Franklin. Defensively, I went back and forth on a couple names. Obviously, I think Colby Field stands out just because he's obviously the preseason defensive player of the year, but I think most Tech fans know his name by now. So I'm gonna give you his linebacker running mate, actually. I'm going to give Chief Leota, 43 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss. Kind of sneaky. He finished second on the team with 3.5 sacks last year, so he certainly knew how to get after the quarterback. So I would expect that he is going to get a lot more opportunities to rush the passer this year. He's going to be involved, I think, a little bit more towards the line of scrimmage. I just love his energy. energy. I love his passion. Talking to him throughout fall camp this year, he's just a guy that people rally around. He's funny. I just love his personality, and I think his teammates love him as well. So he's definitely a guy that I think not only off the field is a leader, I think on the field this year he's going to take a huge jump in production. So I would expect Chief Leota to be a guy that, by season's end, him and Colby Fields are definitely going to be in contention, I think, for probably the best linebacking duo in Conference USA. Another quick name I would throw out there, this defensive line has a lot of new faces. I think Emmanuel Ogans is a defensive end from Tyler Junior College that the staff is really high on. He didn't have a great, pass rushing history at Tyler Junior College. But that being said, he's going to get opportunities to start on that defensive line this season. So I'm really curious to see kind of what he can do with that opportunity. So I know I went a little bit longer on this one, but I think it was worth it just because we hadn't talked since the Sun Belt move. So I wanted to just, kind of update you on my season predictions and some breakout players. So this will be year 4 for me covering Louisiana Tech. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm curious to see if they can put it all together finally and have a winning season. As someone that covers the program, covering a bowl game would be kind of nice. Covering a bowl game that they earned would be nice. And obviously keeping some continuity of the coaching staff, going into the Sun Belt would certainly help as well. So, bottom line is, just one more time, I have Louisiana Tech finishing 7-5 in the 2025 season. The 2025 opener is just a couple days away, so I'm looking forward to it here and excited to see what the Bulldogs have in store. For now, that's going to do it on this edition of Tech in 10. I'm sports editor Matt Belinson. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.